Hello, we are here with Matthew Meyer. He's the author of three very beautiful books that we published, and he is an American artist and author living in Japan. So nice to meet you, Matthew.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
So what I wanted to ask you is how did you start to be passionate to these Japanese monsters and the Japanese culture in general, and how did you end up being an author of this kind of books?
Sure, yeah. So I've been interested in folklore my entire life. When I was young, I really liked fairy tales and mythology and stories from around the world. And I also really liked ghost stories and horror stories and things like that. So I've always had it in me that the things that make up what yokai folklore is have always been a part of my life. When I was in college, I spent a semester I spent a month abroad in Japan, doing a homestay. And while I was here, I really got interested in the art. I went to a lot of museums, just got to see a lot of traditional crafts. And I really wanted to come back and focus a lot more on Japanese art after graduation. So a couple years after I graduated, I moved back to Japan. And so while I was here, I spent a lot of time looking at artwork, like I said. And when you look at Japanese artwork, it's impossible not to come into folklore because there's just such a rich tradition of illustration and painting here where you've got the stories of folklore, monsters, ghosts, and things are just vividly portrayed in the artwork.
So it was,
it was just while looking at artwork, I just kept seeing all these ghosts and monsters, and that was something that had always appealed to me anyway. So I just kept looking more and more into it, and that's when I sort of discovered just how big the world of yokai was in the world of Japanese folklore. And it was something that I had heard a little bit about growing up, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot of information on Japanese folklore in English or in any language other than Japanese. It's very, very closed off. So as I was studying this and looking into it, I thought, this would be something really great to show on my blog, my website, and just sort of introduce to people and just share some of these really cool illustrations and stories. So I started writing a blog about Japanese yokai, and I would paint a yokai and just write a short blurb about it on my website. And that started to get really, really popular. So that's sort of where this all began. Like it was my childhood passions and my love of art just both intersected in the world of yokai.
That's great, no? You can you discovered this lack of information and transformed it into your passion, into your job. So what you did to finance your books, you used Kickstarter.
Yes, that's
Tell
right.
us about this idea. How did you came up with this idea?
Well, right around the time that I started showing yokai on my blog, it was 2009, and that was the year that Kickstarter came out. And so I heard about Kickstarter when it was new, and the idea really interested me, this idea of sort of liberating creators and artists from the traditional methods of creation that we would have had to use for forever up until the internet allowed that sort of thing to happen. So while I was writing my blog, people kept asking me, are you going to do a book? Are you going to do a book? And it's something that I hadn't really thought about, but then when they were mentioning it, and then I thought about Kickstarter being able to sort of help artists fund projects like this, I thought, wow, this is something that would be really right up my alley. So, I thought about going the traditional way where you write a manuscript and you submit it to many, many publishers. But I thought for the type of book that I wanted to do, which is 100 illustrations in encyclopedia format, I didn't think that the traditional method was really fit for that. So I decided this is something that I want to do myself. Whether or not I get funding for this or a publisher, this is a book that I want to create. So crowdfunding and going with Kickstarter really appealed to me more so than going the traditional route. And it ended up being really successful for me. So After my first project, I started working on a second book and a third book, and now a fourth book. So using Kickstarter to start these encyclopedias has been really fun and a great way to outreach and market to a whole bunch of people who probably didn't know about yokai before.
Yeah. So the first book you wrote was yokai, right? And then
Yeah.
with Nui Nui, you made Yokai and Hakutaku, the book of Hakutaku, and the last one that came out just a few weeks ago is Mononoke, the Hour of Meeting Evil Spirits. So
That's right.
could you please tell us the difference between these three books and a bit of details of each one, how many monsters are described, and maybe the ones that you prefer or some secrets about them?
Sure. Yeah, each of the books follows a very similar format. So it's 100 illustrations and descriptions of each one. So each book has more than 100 yokai in it, a little bit over 100. And for the most part, they're very similar in format. There's no duplicates. Each book is full of unique yokai. My first book, which is The Night Parade of 100 Demons, features sort of a general look at yokai. So I start with some of the scary ones, as well as some of the cute ones and some of the funny ones, some of the gross ones. So I tried really hard to showcase how broad and diverse the world of Japanese folklore is.
Okay.
With my second book, which was The Hour of Meeting Evil Spirits, I wanted to focus on dark magic, black magic, and really, really evil, nasty creatures. So you'll find a lot of information in that book about sorcery and the curses that wizards and sorcerers would place on people, or you'll find some information about hell and the underworld, and just all sorts of really bad creatures and what they do to people. And in the book of the Hakutaku, I wanted to focus on how Japanese folklore is not all just uniquely Japanese. Some of it is imported from foreign countries too, such as China, India, and other places in the world. So the book of the Hakutaku features yokai that have been imported to Japan from different countries, but then over time became something unique on their own while they were in Japan.
So three very different but very how do you say, points of view that intersect with each other and give us a 360-degree of view of the panorama of monsters in Japan. And that's why it's a very unique job that you are doing, because as you said, there is no literature about them, almost not in our Occidental market and culture. So and for the future, which are your plans? Which is the fourth book that is coming?
Well, I have another book that's coming later this year, and it's called The Fox's Wedding, and it follows the same format. It's another encyclopedia, and this one features two really interesting chapters. One of them is a chapter all about foxes and the magical foxes that play a very big role in Japanese folklore. They're very important in yokai mythology. And the other interesting chapter is one about pandemic causing yokai. Since we've got the global pandemic going on, and there's a lot of yokai that in the past were thought to spread disease and pandemics, and also even cure pandemics and save people from disease. So I thought it would be a really interesting and timely subject to place in this book. So that's something that I think people can look forward to for my next book.
Why the fox is, what's the meaning of the fox, if it has one in the culture?
Well, they have a lot of roles in folklore, but I think it's an interesting creature because it's a creature that lives near humans, but is actually very scared of humans and only comes out at night. So when you see them, it's only for a second, and then they usually vanish into the woods. So their behavior is actually really similar to ghosts and monsters. They're creatures that live with us, but you don't really get to see them up close and directly. They vanish very quickly. You hear something and then you look and then it's gone. So fox behavior and ghost behavior is very, very similar.
Very similar.
So I think that's part of the reason that foxes became such a magical and spiritual creature in Japan.
That's very, very interesting. And also it's, I'm very curious to see this, the last one title, because this of the pandemic shows how this situation is, you know, cycling in history. So as it's was so present in the past, and also shows how yokais are very, very present, even if maybe they are now legendary stories, but in the Japanese everyday culture. So people live every day with this imaginary characters in their background of their minds, right?
Yeah, I think it shows that yokai are, they're not just something from long ago. There's something that still has relevance today, particularly with the pandemic yokai. It shows how even though, things happened 200 or 300 years ago, people still acted the same way, and people still had the same personalities and feelings and thoughts. So it sort of connects us with ancient people and medieval and older people in a way that you don't normally feel every day. But when you read about yokai, you can kind of feel that connection to the past and realize that we're all very similar, no matter what time we live in or what country we live in or what culture we're from. The people are very similar around the world.
Yeah, so as a conclusion, I would say that even if today yokai is just an representative artwork of something of the past, their function is to show that there is a common connection, and they are something that keeps us together in the story, and that's very, very unique and important point of view, I would say, also of your books, no? They help us.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something particular about the 3 books that maybe connects them somehow of the hard work or something?
Sure. I like to sort of sneak in a lot of little secrets in my books that people will only notice if they read very closely or if they read all of them. It's just sort of something fun to do as an artist. One thing that I think probably not everybody notices is that if you flip through all of the illustrations in my first book in order, you'll notice that the seasons change throughout the year. So as you start the book, it's summertime and it's very green and there's flowers, and then the leaves begin to change as you turn the page, and then snow begins to fall, and then you're in winter, and as you keep turning the page, then you've got flowers and cherry blossoms, and finally the book ends in a traditional Japanese summer festival. So if you just sort of flip through random pages, you won't notice that. But if you go through the book carefully and watch the illustrations, you might notice that.
This is a great idea. How did you come up with this idea?
I guess when you're painting 100 illustrations, it's a very long task, and sometimes your mind wanders and you think, what can I do to make this make this more entertaining for myself? Of course, painting is very fun, but when you're the one doing it and you're spending 20 hours on each illustration, sometimes you want to entertain yourself in other ways. So having little Easter eggs and hidden secrets like that is something that it's really fun. So you'll notice little secrets like that in all of my books. Sometimes I'll include a character in one illustration, and then I'll have the same character in a very different illustration, and it looks like the same person is doing different things.
In 2 different books. Okay, we will discover more about these secrets of the books in Instagram Live that we will let you know when it will be, so stay tuned. And for now, I really thank you, Matthew, because it was a very big pleasure speaking with you, getting to know a little bit more of this fantastic and mysterious world of yokai. Thank you very much. We will talk again soon.
Thanks so much for having me. That was fun.
Ciao, ciao, Matthew.
Bye-bye.